All right, well, welcome to the session, the last session of the day, Accelerate ATO and Simplify Compliance through Automation. My name is Scott Thornton. I'm a consulting engineer with Palo Alto Networks. And
hi, afternoon everyone. My name is Josh Hammer. I'm a security partner solution architect. In my role, I work with AWS's security partners as they develop solutions for our mutual customers so that we can deploy and seamlessly integrate with AWS. And I appreciate your guys' time today, and I'm looking forward to hopefully an entertaining session, and right after we have a nice opening reception. So hopefully see you guys there if you have questions.
All right, so is everybody here for the ATO session in compliance? ATO, authorization to operate. It refers to basically when you have permission for a product to operate in an existing system, right? Typically it gets used in the federal government for information systems, but fear not, if you're not just working with the federal government, there are enterprise customers who use ATOs as well. If you think about it from the standpoint of if you had a new piece of software that you needed to be installed on a network, right? There's going to be a couple things that are going to have to happen in order to achieve an ATO. One, you're going to have to make sure that that device doesn't, or piece of software doesn't interfere with other things that are operating on the network, right? Got to make sure you're not going to break other things when you install your software. And secondly, you have to make sure that it's going to play well with other applications. So before allowing the product to connect, all of these need to take place, right? And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and we're going to talk about continuous compliance and other things that you can do in order to make your path to ATO quicker. So how many people in the room today use one of these security compliance programs? Well, I guess how many people don't use something here? You don't follow any compliance? Okay, one. So that's pretty much anticipated in terms of what we see in terms of organizations utilizing compliance programs. Whether you're talking FedRAMP for the federal government standards, or you're talking PCI, for people who are taking credit card processing information. You have a NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, where you have various different security controls that are in place, that are generally applicable to the U.S. federal government for their information systems, where you have to go through a formal assessment and authorization process, basically to ensure that you have sufficient security in place to protect confidentiality and user data, and et cetera. One of the great things, though, about moving to the cloud, in particular AWS, is that they already adhere to all these standards, and they offer solutions in place, whether you're talking about white papers, best practice guides, or cloud formation scripts where you can actually go in and deploy a system that is secure from a design standpoint, right? So you as the user then just have to worry about securing your data, right? Part of the whole shared responsibility model. AWS is going to secure their data centers, right? They're going to provide security of the cloud, and you as a user are going to have to provide security on the cloud. Did you want to comment on anything there? Okay.
No, I was just kind of wondering, is anyone here today using Palo Alto Networks with AWS? One or two. Cool.
Great. What we've seen is with organizations who are doing things like continuous compliance and people who have been able to streamline their ATO processes, they have certain characteristics that they follow. One of which is they start with the best, right? They're utilizing best of breed partners. And when we talk security, I don't like to talk about a vendor-customer relationship because it's really a partnership, right? So you need to find best of breed partners, people like AWS and Palo Alto Networks. Organizations also operate differently. They don't operate in a siloed fashion, right? People who are able to do this continued compliance and streamlining ATO do so because they share workloads, right? They're not operating where, we have one big project that we're going to work on for the year and we're only going to produce that project, and you have 5 different groups who are siloed operating. They're operating in small chunks. They're executing on their strategy. They are able to manage the things that they're doing continuously, right? So they have tools in place that allow them to see if they're compliant, if the changes that they're making are valid, right? And if they're not, they're able to apply fixes automatically, right? They don't have to go through a big manual process and change controls and everything else. They can change it on the fly because they have tools in place that recognize an anomaly and will fix it. This makes reporting easy, right? Because you no longer have to sit down and spend weeks or months figuring out what's changed. Has my configuration drifted? Am I following the standards that have been put in place by my CISO? This results in a happy audit, right?
And when you look at AWS specifically, you start to look at the different tools and solutions that we offer to help you down that road of automation. First of all, there's the idea of infrastructure as code, and we call that generally CloudFormation. And we actually provide you with pre-built templates that you can go download that will actually meet PCI or NIST. And along with those templates that will deploy out the VPC infrastructure, which is our virtual private cloud, we will set up auditing for you. We will set up identity management. We'll set up log storage for S3. And all of this will be fully automated to deploy. In addition, you can actually go and grab our matrix that will actually show you how each of the different compliance requirements map to the solution that you have in that deployment. And then we leave it open for where there are parts that you're responsible for, as you mentioned in the shared responsibility. We also provide you with a variety of other tools to help you with it in guidance. As Andy mentioned in our last reInvent, we're trying to be more prescriptive as we help our customers journey to the cloud. So we've released a few tools that kind of help along with that management. There are things like Service Catalog that allow you to develop standard templates that you can give to teams for either AWS accounts or even for application servers, databases that meet your stringent requirements. We also have solutions like GuardDuty and Security Hub that talk to and integrate with our security partners so that you can actually look at detections, alerting, reporting compliance information, and connect it with your security solutions. And with all of this, it allows you to start to build this idea of CI/CD, the idea that you're building infrastructure into a pipeline. Because once you can convert your infrastructure into something that you can save as a text file, you can then iterate on it and understand the deployment of it and quickly and easily create copies of that environment to go forward with. And then you can use those same security tools with our partners and ourselves to see what that environment looks like. We have a set of checks that are available called config that will actually, one, go look in your account, and they will tell you about snapshots in time of what was something configured like. If you think about a lot of audits that people are part of, I used to do SOX reporting. Anyone do SOX reports here? All right, a couple of people in finance. Okay, good. At the end of the day, every quarter I had to sign a SOX report. And it was a snapshot in time of access. But at the same point, we also had to do a snapshot in time of our infrastructure that we actually got the access at that snapshot. And it's that kind of ability that config gives you. But then you can take that information and start to automate those checks. You can say, I don't want any S3 bucket to be open to the public. And you can write that check and have it run. And if it sees an anomaly, it can change it. So as we look to that part, it starts to go to this idea of the shared responsibility model, as Scott mentioned. And as the shared responsibility model, it varies based on the service you're using. So all of these compliance standards that you inherit with AWS, and you can actually look at our documentation, will show you which services have met which compliance requirements. Each part of the shared responsibility model differs. If you look at EC2, for example, which is our elastic computing services, that we basically take care of the storage, the network, the host OS, the virtualization, and you're responsible for the OS and the server that we give to you to run. So there's a lot of configuration on how you decide to update, how you decide to patch, how you decide to configure access to that box, You might use security groups, which are our version of a stateful firewall. You might use IP tables as well. You might want to deploy agents for malware detection if you're looking to meet PCI requirements. We'll give you the baselines to say that our infrastructure is good, and we met these requirements, and you can actually look at those reports that we provide you for these requirements in your console. So there's a section called Artifacts, and in Artifacts, you could actually go and download the different reports that show you how we have maintained it, so that when you go to your auditors or your compliance teams and you're showing them, well, I'm using AWS now, are you meeting this requirement A? Well, just like the shared responsibility model, you'll document how you're doing the stuff on your servers for EC2, and if you're using S3, which you don't have to worry about the virtualization or the infrastructure, you'll just show how you configured your access to your bucket. And then you'll have this document that says how AWS does it, and that we have been certified for it, that you can then produce. So we'll help streamline that process for you. So a lot of the processes that you're doing today to meet these requirements, you're actually going to reduce that workload. You're going to have less to do. You're going to be able to look at our reports and say, oh, okay, I don't have to worry about data center security, for example. I might not have to worry about certain patching. There's certain parts that are shared between the two of us, and we'll document those out in a lot of those matrices. And from there, you'll be able to figure out what you are responsible for and be able to start to build an automation for those and checks to help automate those solutions.
So taking a look at this list of people in your environment, in your organization, who owns security and compliance? How many people think that or feel that the CISO owns that responsibility? How about the SecOps team? No? Risk and compliance? Yeah. So the fact of the matter is everybody's responsible for security and compliance. It really doesn't matter who you are in an organization. Everybody has some sort of responsibility, down to anybody with access to your network or a device on your network. They are also responsible. If you take a look at like your SecOps team, for example, they're responsible for the administration of the security posture, the investigation, monitoring alerts that come in, tracking down possible alerts if it's something that seems serious. They're also responsible for the enforcement of your security posture. Then you have the DevOps team, right? Historically, there wasn't a lot of trust with the DevOps team, but in today's world, there is a lot of trust, right? Because the DevOps teams of the world are driving people towards utilizing cloud technology. The applications that are in use affect almost every area of an organization, whether you're talking human resources, finance, the actual core of your company's business. The DevOps teams are driving a lot of those needs. And in terms of importance, I can't stress it enough that it's very important for your security teams to work directly with your DevOps teams. You need to be able to implement security and testing and reporting earlier in your process. This is called shift left security. So if you think about your CI/CD pipeline that Josh mentioned earlier, where you're doing things like agile development, it's important that you give your DevOps teams the tools and the guidance that they need in order to develop software in a secure fashion. Because I've worked with DevOps teams for a long time. I came from a DevOps company, and I can tell you this, no one in the DevOps organization doesn't want to do good in terms of security. They just always can't. Right? Timelines force them to do something else. They may not have the right tools in place. They may not have the right guidance, right? Coming down from other organizations within your environment.
And one thing I've noticed, I don't know if you've seen it, is there's a nomenclature difference. I mean, if you think about a developer, as you said, their goal is to write code that executes and delivers the business's need. And we'll say SQL injection. Mm-hmm. What it really is input validation failure.
Right.
And I think when we communicate to the team, part of that shift left that Scott's talking about is starting to change the way we communicate with the industry and with our peers so that they can understand where we're coming from to understand the issue. Because if you just push an issue, hey, you have an input validation on this field, a developer understands how to fix that. Mm-hmm. If you said you have a SQL injection, developer might scratch their head, and you've also escalated it to possibly a Sev 2 risk.
Right. Right.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. And DevOps organizations, by default, they operate in a break-fix fashion, right? That's their day-to-day. They operate on small chunks, and that's how they operate and execute quickly. So it's very important that we see more collaboration between like SecOps and DevOps, or even the CISO. And then you take a look at your audits, your risk and compliance department. They're the ones who are responsible for working with your auditors, right? Providing the overall corporate governance and reporting to the executive teams and so on. And then there's the CISO, right? I like to call the CISO the politician. They're the evangelist of an organization's security policy. They're providing which policies should be in place, how we're going to execute against those, and providing education for other users within your environment. And then oftentimes there's some type of program lead or CTO, CIO that will provide the same. So audits. How many people here do yearly audits? It's like 8. How many people don't do any audits? How many people
I personally don't audit myself.
I don't audit myself either. How many people do daily audits? There's a huge difference between I locked my door last year versus I locked my door this morning, right? If you think about that from a security standpoint, we're doing ourselves and our customers a disservice if we aren't taking advantage of things like continuous compliance and having the ability to audit ourselves on any type of interval, right? Whether it's daily, weekly, or monthly, we need to be able to validate that we haven't had configuration drift. We haven't had, in terms of things like infrastructure as code, we haven't lost our desired state configuration, right? Because when you talk things like infrastructure as code, you're basically saying, this is my desired state, and I'm going to use CloudFormation templates in order to build that, right? And it's always going to keep my devices in their desired state unless you have configuration drift. And you're not going to know about that if you're only doing audits once a year or quarterly or monthly, right? And the only difference between being able to do an audit on yearly versus daily is automation, excuse me. So it is important to protect things like personally identifiable information, whether you're talking about confidential, classified, or any other sensitive data that you need to be able to put your fingerprint on, right? How many organizations today practice some form of agile development? Yeah, except in this room, it's about 25. So how many people just aren't raising their hand because it's the end of the day? Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
There we go.
How about orgs that practice agile compliance? Anybody out there? Nice job. Nice. That's awesome. So this is something that a lot of organizations don't think about. If you have a mission-critical need that comes up, and you can deploy a solution to that mission-critical need in AWS through a CloudFormation template in less than an hour, why can't you do the same with your compliance, right? Why can't we roll out a security design framework where we can have continuous validation like we can in deploying a solution in the cloud, right? We should be able to have that.
And one of the things that helps you with that, as we create that CloudFormation template, which is basically either YAML or JSON, which is a text format, when we convert that into the infrastructure, we're using our own internal APIs and communications to do that. You can use those APIs as well to understand the configuration state as when it's deployed. And our partner solutions can actually help you validate that infrastructure as code, the CloudFormation, even before it's deployed. So you can not only make sure that you've met, say you don't want any security groups open to the world or any internet gateways. You can have your template, your infrastructure, scanned before it's even deployed by our partner solutions like Palo Alto Networks. And then once it's deployed, as he said, you're going to use those same APIs that we're using to give you access to our console, to be able to go check each configuration option in your account.
So let's take a look at the classic way that we've all probably managed compliance at some point, right? Most organizations kind of start measuring mid-summertime, knowing that their audits are coming in August and September. So they're going to start measuring in the July timeframe. Then you kind of start to see a little bit of panic starting to sink in, right? We got to start fixing these issues. We know we have issues here. We know we have issues there. Let's start fixing them. August rolls around. Now it's time to really start freaking out, right? People have calendar invites from auditors. They know they're coming. They know they have to work with them. And so we're pulling in everybody and their brother in order to fix these issues that we know are going to come up, right? So then it's time to sit with the auditors. Then you sit down and you pray or you hope or whatever you personally do that things are going to turn out okay, right? Then what happens? Then we spend, another 2 weeks or a month or hopefully not longer, but let's face it, I've been there where it's taken a lot longer to fix all the issues that came up that the auditor said weren't right. Then when that's all said and done, we still have 6 to 12 months in order to get our authorization to operate, right? We have to be able to execute quicker because our DevOps teams are executing a heck of a lot quicker, right? They're pumping out code daily. Right? So the question becomes, how do we manage this huge backlog of technical debt, right? We have technical debt that comes about from these audits. How do we manage ourselves out of that?
So we're going to look at the idea of doing it continuously. And it starts with two key concepts. One we talked about was DevOps, which is this concept of developers, iterating consistently, deploying in real time. Another concept we're going to talk about as well is DevSecOps. And that's an interesting approach because a lot of people in the security industry are starting to adopt it, and there's different ways different organizations do it. And it comes down to two things. One, it comes down to providing and creating tools. And the tools that you provide and create need to align to the paradigms that your solution is. So if you think about it, we have this concept of pets versus cattle. Have people heard of this before? Okay. So the concept here, and I use it in AWS terms, we have something called workspaces. And these are virtual desktop environments that we use to access our email, write PowerPoints like this, communicate via Chime. It's something that's running Windows. It needs to get patched every first Tuesday of the month. I have software on it that needs to get patched. And if you decided to be like, Josh, I'm just going to wipe out your workspace and you'll just start fresh again every Tuesday of every month, I think you'd probably have some very irate, at least I'd be irate. I have a lot of configuration, a lot of stuff in there. This is the idea of a cattle server. It's something we've nurtured, we've taken care of. A pet server, excuse me. It's like my pet. I take her out, I walk her. And then there's the idea of a cattle. And this could be, think about like a web server, right? Your web server generally has a set of JavaScript pages or perhaps HTML, whatever or node code that you're running on it, an Nginx server with a specific configuration. But for the most part, you pretty much have that pretty much baked to build. And you have that so that you could basically say, you know what? I need to upgrade to the newest version of Amazon Linux. I'm just going to blow out my old one and replace it with a new one. And you can continuously deploy that out by saying, OK, I need to go from Amazon Linux 1 to 2. You'll do all your tests in another environment, and then when you have it, you'll bake this AMI. The same way you guys create gold images in your organization, you're going to create a gold AMI, an Amazon machine image, that you're going to use for web servers, and just deploy that out. So that's how you're going to look at those two things. So you're kind of wondering, well, OK, how do I start to manage the pets, right? I need to be able to automate the pets part too. And with AWS, we have solutions like System Manager that allow you to push out patches in an automated fashion. So you can actually run code to say, run a bash script to update repos, or perhaps run PowerShell to download my newest antivirus agent. And you can decide, based on your application that you're developing, what it falls in, and start to develop those tools that can help you deploy those things in closer and closer to real time. So that's how I got my application out. Now I need to start looking at the infrastructure and the auditing and the compliance. And that's where we want to start to look at things at all stages. So the idea of DevSecOps is, one, to provide those tools to support building my images so that my builders have what I'll call as trusted blocks to build with. And the other thing that they're going to need is ways to, patch those things that are the more pets. The other thing we're going to need to do is provide them with tools and iterations so that they can check their stuff as they move it up through the environment. So as I said, I build that automated infrastructure with my CloudFormation. I don't want to have to worry about whether or not it's compliant or not. I just want to deploy it. I want to get it out. And I'm going to scan it and run it. And either you can have a choice of checking it before, and maybe you have some default checks, and that's, I think, the best approach we've seen, customers looking at stuff for default checks. And then when they deploy it, you start to monitor it. You check for configuration drift. You start to notice, oh, look, there was that security group that's not supposed to be 0.0.0 for a Bastion host, say. Let me go switch that up to be my local IP address. You can actually look at that change that you need to make, use an API call to change it in real time, and it will change. You can write that log out. You can create the report that one shows I got it and it was done. And if you look at solutions that help to do this, we have this kind of model here. So like, I'm going in, my DevOps team has to push out an emergency fix. They don't have time to follow the normal procedures, perhaps. And what happens is something in the configuration changes. I get an alert. And with Prisma Cloud, you're actually going to be looking at all these configuration changes in your account. And it's going to notice, OK, there's that security group that we were talking about. And it's going to kick off a notification. And an SNS is basically a notification service, like a push system. You can use that notification service to trigger remediation, a Lambda. Lambda is serverless, and it will run and say, OK, I saw that security group, I changed it. And then it's going to also, while it also does that integration, it might actually open a ServiceNow ticket or a Jira ticket, or perhaps push it to a Slack channel to validate, hey, we noticed this. Do you want to remediate this or not? You can actually decide how you need to deal with that issue, because it might be that maybe that fix that you had to bring in was because there were some network connectivity issues. That's why you changed it to another IP address, because there were some network issues with your local office. Whatever that reason is, you can have it. It gets pushed into your ticket system, so you can document it for auditing reasons, or you can automate the resolution to it when you need to. And then you have the dashboards to look and validate that you did it or didn't.
So now that we've talked a little bit about how we can handle some of this, let's take a look at that same timeline that we looked at earlier and imagine this instead, right? So July rolls around. We know that the auditors are coming. We have put ourselves into a state where we're doing things like continuous compliance. We've implemented security into our DevOps process, and now we're further along in the process, right? July isn't such a panic. And the fact of the matter is, we're able to do our final measurements in September, right? After enjoying a nice long summer vacation, because we've been tracking the state of our compliance automatically, right? So when we're in measurement for 2 weeks with our auditors, and our authorization to operate's done, it's approved, because the controls are tightly monitored. Right?
Because these, like Prisma Cloud, it's actually looking and querying our APIs for the configuration of all the different services that it can in real time, every 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever you deem. Imagine being able to check your configuration every hour.
So what is Agile compliance? It really comes down to it's continuous compliance, right? It's simply put, we have a functional security program in place. That's what Agile compliance is. It's about making small, incremental changes to our environment. It also has to do with not taking on one big, singular code development project, right? Because that's not the way DevOps teams operate anymore. They can't do so efficiently. They can't do so quickly. And we need to be able to operate at the speed of the cloud in order to, have things like continuous compliance, being able to do daily audits, being able to run reports as needed. If an auditor comes in, or if your CISO comes in and says, I need to know where we are today, you can run those reports instantly.
So when you look at those configurations that we're talking about, to start to understand what is the math behind what do I need to audit, Because at the end of the day, as I said, as part of the shared responsibility model, for EC2, for example, you're responsible for how you configure those security groups. That's how you get access. So if we look at that part, you can go in and go to the console and look, okay, I see the security group. Looks okay. At least SSH is somewhat locked down. The internet's open to the world, which, generally that's probably what you want for your internet-facing web application. Okay, great. So I might have this. I might have hundreds of security groups. I might have hundreds of servers that I need to go look at too. I could go into the console, which is triggering an API call, and look at every single one, say, okay, this is security group, grab the ID, paste it in, and we have names and tags you can use. And you create a report that says, okay, this one is good, it meets our requirements for least privilege, it has the Bastion host is locked down. Okay, well, let's go look at some math here. All right, so if you look at one account, and let's assume you have 35 testable controls, right? And you're gonna start to look. Okay, well, now I have these controls, and I go into the console, I got good internet, I'm clicking around, going through, 2.5 minutes per check. Okay, so that's 397 hours. That's actually not so bad for one account. But with AWS, the one thing we start to talk about when we talk about this idea of being prescriptive is in the guidance we tell you on how to isolate environments. When I worked in professional services with AWS, this is before I joined the partner team, I worked on a project with a large telecommunications company. And this telecommunications company was adopting AWS very quickly. And they were building out a cloud compliance team. Now, this cloud compliance team, I was focused on helping them to try to figure out how they can speed up their compliance reporting so that they can do basically automated compliance. So first what we did is we started and we looked, okay, well, we actually had 40 accounts. We didn't have one. All right, so that changes our math a little now. So if we kind of start looking, the number of controls we had, number of accounts, I don't think anyone's going to pull that off. Any one person can do that. And maybe a team of a lot of people can do it. So what we realized is we needed some help. We needed some tooling to be able to do that. And we also needed to understand what these different testable controls were. Because in this telecommunications company, for example, because they supported so many different organizations, they actually had kind of almost like the most uber compliance framework I've ever seen. They basically started taking everything from every framework and lapping them over together because they had to meet federal requirements. They had to meet PCI requirements. So what we did is we found a vendor tool. It happened to be Prisma Cloud. And I worked with our head of compliance, and what we did is we went in and started to add these accounts. We added all their 40 accounts. And you're asking, why do they have 40 accounts? It's about segregation. That's the hardest level of segregation AWS can give you. An account is separate. I have my own account. Palo Alto Networks has an account on AWS. They're not connected unless you deliberately go in and provide a cross-account role. Now, so what we did is we added in all those accounts. And then we had to tag those accounts. We realized that not all the accounts were production workloads. Some were dev, some were test. Some were shared services accounts that had their centralized reporting and centralized logging. So we had to go categorize them as to prioritization for those different compliance requirements. Not every application was applicable to every compliance framework. So then what we did is we ran it. We ran it across all the 40 accounts. And you guys are saying, oh man, that's taking forever. Well, so about 30 minutes later, we were looking at reports. And what we started to look at is we looked at some interesting findings. One, we found that they were actually spending a lot of money accidentally because they forgot to delete some unattached DBS volumes. So as part of our compliance report, we actually saved them a lot of money because we're like, hey, can you go tell your guys to check this box that says delete volumes when you delete the instances? You'll actually save a lot of money. But we also started to do is we saw the issues that popped up. And we saw the ones that were high, the ones that were medium, and the ones that were low. And what him and I did, because he was actually very new to AWS, we went into the GUI that said, okay, this is a NIST 853 issue. The reason it is a NIST 853 issue is because you don't have limited control access for, say, IAM. In this case, you had more than 5 users. So what you need to do is you need to restrict the number of IAM users, and they recommended federation. So what he did is he went in and looked in the account. He actually logged into the console and did that 2.5-minute activity of looking at what the change was. It's like, okay, I understand why this is a problem. The tool actually helped him learn not only how the compliance frameworks map to AWS, it also taught him how to use AWS. He learned what an IAM user was. He learned what an EBS block volume was. He then learned what an RDS instance was. And what started to happen is he started to learn that he could actually create newer types of controls. So they started to have a tagging rule. So what he did is, as we started to create these reports, what we would do is we would send them out. We'd say, okay, we noticed all these compliance issues. Like you said, what was it? How long would it take you to create that report and you'd send it out, 2 to 4 weeks?
Right.
So we create this report almost every day. And we'd send it out to the different business owners for the account, saying, hey, we noticed these issues in your accounts, please fix them. And what we started to find is that there were things that we understood how to fix, because either we went into the console or because we actually wrote some automation scripts to do it. And there were some things we couldn't. So what we did is we wrote an email job that basically said, I saw a tag that had someone's, we had an owner tag. The owner tag had the person's email address. And it also had the business owner. So like that, CX person, the CXO. So what we did is, if we noticed a high level of risk and in a production account for something that we deemed extremely sensitive that we could not automate away. So let's say it was something related to RDS, for an instance, that wasn't being backed up, and we didn't know what the backup schedule was for that organization. We would automatically generate an email to them. And then for the other things that we started to realize that there were things that we knew we could fix. For example, we have something called CloudTrail. Does everyone here know what CloudTrail is? All right, great. And I hope everyone that nodded has it turned on in their AWS accounts. All right, if you don't, it's kind of the Uber audit solution for AWS. Every API call against the console, against our direct APIs gets logged there. We actually could detect that it wasn't turned on in some of the accounts, which means they weren't meeting their logging requirements. And this didn't matter whether they were dev or test. This is something you needed to have logging, so we understood what was going on. So what we did is we took that alert that came in, we sent it to that SNS topic, as you saw earlier, and with that alert, we then went in, looked at that account, and then had permissions on it because we were in an auditor role, and the specific permissions we were granted were to be able to turn on CloudTrail only. We turned it on for them, so that we automatically remediated these issues before the team ever had to see it. They didn't have to deal with anything. We took the compliance, the reporting, we went through the steps of kind of doing it manually in smaller batches, in smaller cases, to learn how to do it. And once we learned how to do it, we started to automate it. Because until you can, crawl, you can't walk. And that's the approach we took by using the tools. And it taught you, one, AWS, and two, how these different configuration options map to the compliance frameworks.
So recently, Palo Alto Networks announced the launch of Prisma, which is, as of today, the most complete cloud security suite on the market for today and tomorrow. It provides unprecedented visibility into data, assets, and risks within the cloud, providing secure data, providing being able to run applications without having to take any compromises. And we're doing so with the speed and agility that DevOps teams execute at, right? So providing things like secure access for your mobile and remote users with Prisma Access, which was formerly called GPCS. Your users don't just sit at corporate today, right? They're everywhere. Users are mobile. We need to be able to provide security to our mobile workforce without having to have to backhaul back to our data center in order to run through a firewall or go back and get our security there, right? We have to enable users to operate mobily, whether it's a branch office or whether it's just a true mobile user. If you look at Prisma SaaS, another part of the Prisma Cloud Security Suite, this is going to deliver the ability to discover and control the use of third-party applications that run within the cloud.
This will also let you look at objects in your S3 buckets to understand what's the PII in there. Is there information that I have deemed different classifications? Is this my source code that's there? It can actually look at those objects and determine what is this object. And also, for those of us that use S3 to host and provide access to different software deployments and perhaps allow people to upload stuff to us, it can scan it to detect if it's malware. What it can also do is it can also tell you if you've moved a file. So let's say you had a file in one S3 bucket that you decided to copy over to another bucket. Maybe you moved it from a higher classification to a lower classification. It can actually tell you if that happened, so you can understand if a compliance change occurred that you now need to go remediate or perhaps even document.
Yep. And with Prisma Public Cloud, which was our Redlock and Evident product, you're actually able to get continuous security monitoring, be able to validate your compliance posture, and cloud security capabilities across any cloud environment, whether we're talking public, private, or hybrid.
And it's even helping, as I said, one of the recent releases is to look at those cloud formation templates for challenges, for any issues. It can also look, is anyone here using containers today? All right. So they have a feature where they can actually scan your container to detect if there's malware in it. It's available today. So they're starting to look at the things, the manifest files for deployment of your containers. So as your teams are adopting newer and newer technology platforms, we're working with Palo Alto so that they'll help you secure those things and understand your responsibility part of it. Yeah. And then there's also Demisto.
Right.
Which can actually start to connect all these things together. It allows you to define those playbooks and runbooks on how you want to respond to things. If in case of incidents, breaches, compliance issues, you can document them, have a standard process of, well, what happens when that, my office location is disconnected? Do I go connect to GPCS? Do I need to now go change the IP address of my security group? Mm-hmm. You can have all that documented and automated in a format that can interact from Prisma to GPCS and Aperture.
Right, and also coming in will be the incorporation of our VM series, which is the Palo Alto Network's next generation firewall and a virtualized footprint will become part of the Prisma security suite, providing segmentation protection along with basically all the full features of our firewall set, which gathers data constantly from our Cortex data lake, right? Which is the AI-enabled data lake, security data lake that operates in the cloud, and it's constantly pulling down threats and doing analysis and passing that information along to our other products. And we've most recently announced our intent purchase PureSec and Twistlock, giving us serverless security and container security that will be also included in this product suite. That was all that Josh and I had for today. We're welcome to take questions, and if you leave here and you head to the happy hour, stop by the Palo Alto Networks booth and tell them Josh and Scott sent you, and there's a book on cloud security best practices that you can pick up, along with some swag and drinks. And
yeah, and if you...
Any questions? Yes, sir.
I see Prisma is a public cloud. Is that available in GovCloud as well?
It isn't today. Okay, that would be like a roadmap feature. Yes, sir. And sorry, for the camera, the question was whether or not Prisma Public Cloud is available in GovCloud yet.
I just want to make certain. You did say it will check cloud formation templates before deployment. Does it have any controls over that? And you did say differentials as well.
So today, they released it, I believe, at their Ignite conference. You can submit a cloud formation template to be scanned for a specific set of rules today with Prisma Cloud. That is available. Configuration drift specifically is measured in two ways. One, our cloud formation has something called diff. Their solution can actually look at, when it's scanning your configuration through the APIs, can detect changes in it and document those. So we have our own change drift management for the infrastructure. You can scan it beforehand with Prisma. Once it's deployed, Prisma Cloud Redlock Evident is going to be scanning those changes as they happen in real time. And his question was regarding the ability to scan CloudFormation templates and understand changes in real time. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Hope you enjoyed your first day here.
Thank you.